My hair is messed up. My face is messed up. But I still got my stash, though. So, everything's well, I guess. Anyway, today, hey guys, what's up? And today I'm gonna do another mini albums review, because I'm reviewing yet another 5 albums that had just been released not too long ago, but yeah, it's still quite some time ago. I'm kinda late for these 5 albums, but here you go. This is my script. Very, very small words. I just fit 5 album reviews into one piece of A5 paper, so you know, it's a lot of work, but here we go. Let's start off with a bang with Nas with his new album Nasir. Nas, New York rap legend who has a hell of an amazing debut album, Illmatic, which is easily one of the best rap albums ever, period. And then he kind of went downhill a little bit. He still has a few good albums on the way, but not a single album Nas had released after Illmatic is as good as Illmatic. So, going into this album, Nasir, if you're expecting this album to be the next Illmatic, well, you're going to be extremely disappointed. So, this album is basically the 4th installment of the Kanye West released albums of 2018. Kanye West, had been releasing, all sorts of different albums, including Pusha T's Daytona, his own Yay, we get the Kitsy Ghost album, which is fantastic, and then this is the 4th installment. There are still Tiana Taylor coming up, Chance the Rapper is also coming up, I don't know, maybe some others will also get a 7-track album, because, again, since it is a Ye album, a Ye produced album, it's around 25 minutes long, 7 tracks long, and, again, it's trying to be quality over quantity, and, it's more raw, organic, the beats are lavishing and artistic, and, what's unfortunate is that it seems like Nas had ditched his old school East Coast flow to have this Kanye West flow in order to fit into Kanye West's production. So that's kind of unfortunate. But, you know what? This album, it's quite underwhelming. However, it has 2 amazing album openers though. But, you know what? The first 2 intro songs for this album is actually really damn amazing. The first track, Not For Radio, has an epic, grand, monumental, instrumental. It kind of reminds me of the national anthem, but it's way more lavishing and way more extravagant. And I just love the epic strings behind this track as well. And the lyrics the lyrics on the first verse talks a lot about, Senegal's finest minerals, diamonds, and Egyptian gods. It's so lavishing and extravagant. And then the second verse, Nas had these hyper-political proclamations thrown around randomly. Although it feels a little weak, like the lyrics-wise, it still feels really ambitious, and it still feels very powerful as an album opener. And then we have Cop Shot the Kid, which has an insanely glitchy beat. Cop shot the kid, cop shot the kid, cop shot the kid. And I love the tire screeching sample. It's really nice. And Nas and Kanye's comments on police brutality is really impactful on this track as well. And then the album kind of went from great to less so. Not terrible, but less so. White Label is the 3rd track, which is quite underwhelming. It has a so-so sample, which is really repetitious when sampled in this track, so it's kind of redundant. And then we have Bonjour, which is easily the weakest track on the entire album. The sample is kind of tame, kind of forgettable, and the first verse about women dampening their sexual drive, yet getting slayed anyway, it's such a gross verse. and a very disgusting portrayal of sexual drives in female. And then we have Everything, which is around 7 minutes long. It's really long-winded. The beat is pretty epic. Kanye West singing on this track is pretty beautiful. Not gonna lie, the bass sampled in this track is pretty nice, but it's just so dragged, and the tone of this track is just a little bit mundane and drab. The sound kind of worn off. And then Nas's verse on this track is kind of cringy. You know, his verse on this track is kind of anti-vaccination, and he's really paranoid about it. Like, yeah, vaccination, but what are the side effects? What are they? And yeah, you know, Nas's verse on this track is just. Ugh. And then we have Adam and Eve, which is I guess a little bit of a peak for the flow of the album. I just love the chill and melancholic guitars. They flow really well, and you can hear the guitars kind of skipping in the middle of the verse. You know, it's a really nice touch, in my opinion. Nas's flow is way better, and he sounds more aggressive on this track, and I like the religious themes appeared on Adam and Eve as well. It's pretty cool. And then the album dives down again with Simple Things, which is the album ender. It's a sweet little album ender, but it's just kind of forgettable. It sounds like this album ends off in a whisper instead of a bang. So it's an underwhelming album ending, in my opinion. And overall, the best, my favorite track, Adam and Eve. And Not For Radio is also really, really good. However, the worst, Bonjour, is really bad, in my opinion. Not terrible, but just kind of lame. I'm giving Nas's new album, Nasir, a 6 out of 10. However, the album cover is pretty cool. And then we have the new Father John Misty album, God's favorite customer. Indie folk singer-songwriter Father John Misty, aka Josh Tillman, is back after his last album last year, Pure Comedy, which is an epic, grim, satirical, sarcastic, heartfelt, and beautiful album about humanity. I'm really impressed with that album, although it's kind of slow. It's a little bit too dreary at times, but it's a slow burner, and it's the second best album of 2017 in my opinion. So you know, it's I'm very curious at how Father John Misty would make an album as a follow-up to the epic Pure Comedy that he had released last year. And on this album, Father John Misty, or Josh, kind of plays it way more safer. And it's more lighthearted and more sweet. And the first half of this album is actually really, really solid. It has amazing indie folk tracks. And the second half, it's a little more drab, it's a little more slow, but still it's not that bad. The album starts off with Hangout at the Gallows, which is a beautiful and dreary start for the album, which is amazing. I love the melody progression for this track. It's so beautiful and melancholic. It brings this nostalgic feel to it. That's very golden. And the second track is the highlight of the album, Mr.Tillman, and easily one of the best singles of the year. I just love how charismatic and humorous this track is. I love the light-hearted guitars, and the chord progression are kind of disorienting yet super cutesy and sweet. And the lyrics are very funny as well. It's sung in a standpoint of people around Josh, and it's just kind of funny. It's funny how Josh sees himself from other people's perspectives. And then the third track is Dumb Enough to Try, which is an epic emotional track about, Josh and his wife's relationship being hindered by, emotions and moods. And then we have Date Night, which is an oddball in the track list, but I love this track so much. It's way more heavier, and it is basically a short folk rock song that has some funny lyrics and pretty nice chords to it, and I love the high-pitched harmonies for this track. And then the track Please Don't Die is also pretty damn amazing, although It's more slow. It's more of a slow burner. It's a very powerful and beautiful song about Josh's wife comforting him to not kill himself. If you don't know this, everyone wants to kill themselves nowadays. It's sort of a trend, but sometimes this suicide issue really actually gets real, and on this track, it really gets real, and it's just really powerful. And then we have also a few tracks that I'm kind of underwhelmed by, including the title track. It's kind of slow, it's a little bit mundane. Although it's, again, it's kind of powerful, the message behind, talking about God's favorite customer. Because before, Josh was more religious, but now he's kind of lost touch. And I think it's a pretty good concept as a track, and tracks like The Palace and The Songwriter are two very slow, very boring tracks, very stripped back, very subtle. However, they are also very emotional and sentimental, and it feels deep, and I do like that. The album ending, though, I just don't like the album ending at all. It's super flaccid and uninspiring. And this track, it starts off with like a line saying, "People, what's the deal?" And it just kind of ends off right there. It doesn't go deeper. It feels like Josh had dumbed down this whole humanity songwriting topic. So I just don't like the album ending, man. It's such a weak ending. Still, I love the first half of the album, and the second half is also so-so. I'm giving... Oh yeah, the worst is We're Only People, and the best is Mr.Tillman. I am giving Father John Misty's God's Favorite Customer a 7 out of 10. The third album I'm going to talk about today is the debut album from Tropical Fuckstorm, A Laughing Death in Meatspace, which is an Australian rock band. There are actually a few Australian bands that I really, really love, especially King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard. Really like that band, and this band as well. This band is pretty cool. So they are an Australian psychedelic blues post-punk rock band that has some really raw, organic, and rough, sounds. And this album also feels very apocalyptic, very grim and depressing. And this mood mixed with post-punk psych blues rock is just such a nice style. And it kind of... I know it's kind of weird to say this, but this album sounds like the kind of music I would make if I were to be a musician. This is the kind of music I would make. Not that I am embodying this type of music. It just sounds like something that I would make without, trying too hard to experiment. And most of the vocal performances on this album is pretty nice. Gareth is the vocalist for this band, and his vocal performances are just so dejected and drunken. It's really good. Plus the instrumentals, which are really hectic and sometimes even migraine-inducing in a good way. And, vocal harmonies are also everywhere in this album, and it's really well utilized on this album. And I just love how most of the songs on this album builds tension, and then it kind of lets go of the tension during the chorus or the ending of the track. And, the album starts off with "You Let My Ties Down." And, at first it has these thunderous guitar riffs, but then it kind of breaks into this depressing, laid-back, painful, psychedelic jam. And, the chorus is so relaxing. It's yet so painful at the same time. I just really like it. The track "Antimatter Animals" is more industrial with the buzzy synths. It's less organic, and it's less memorable, but yet it's still pretty good. The third track is easily the best track on the album, "Chameleon Plant," which has a very gloomy tone to it with the warpy sliding guitars and the steady booming drums. and the vocals are very drunk, and it's just such a charismatic, a very headache-inducing track that I really like. I really like the post-punk flair to this track as well. The next track is equally as grim, with The Future of History. Walking, walking, and it has this twisted, sinister guitars that's pretty amazing. And again, I love how apocalyptic and grim the tone of this track is, and the political lyrics also plays off as a little dark and grim as well. And then after a very weak and underwhelming 2 Afternoons, which isn't a really awful track, it's just kind of weak, kind of tame, we get Soft Power, which is even more migraine inducing with the screechy guitar sound effects, and the overall tone of this track is just so slow, dizzying, and devilish. And I like the line about it's either going to Mars or War. It's like the people, or this time it's more targeted at the government. It's either trying to achieve something so ridiculous or starting a conflict. Like, that's just ridiculous. And then we get an instrumental break, Shellfish, Toxin, that has some industrial sound effects, and I love the eerie synths on this track as well. It plays off with an evil tone. And then we get the title track, which is really sad because it sounds like calm after the storm. It sounds like the aftermath of an outbreak of a disease. It's very sad, it's very depressing, very alienating as well. The guitars on this track is very beautiful. And then the album ends off with the Rubber Bullies, which I actually really enjoy. I love the chirpy guitars, and I also kind of like the funny lyrics, A, getting monetized, B, getting criticized. It's pretty smart, pretty creative. And the chorus is really dreary and depressing, yet so beautiful. Hold on tight, the whole world just passed you by. And overall, it's such a beautiful and raw album ending. If there's one big problem I have with this album, is that I don't think the band had gone far enough. Maybe they should, do even more and experiment even more and try even more and write songs like this even more. I don't know why, but after listening to this album, I just have such a strong crave for some relaxing psych blues rock. I'm really looking forward to the next Tropical Fuckstorm album. I'm giving the new Tropical Fuckstorm album, Laughing, Death, and Meatspace, an 8 out of 10, and the worst is 2 Afternoons, and the best is Chameleon Plant. And then we are gonna dive into the new Christina Aguilera album, Liberation. Christina Aguilera, you know her. This woman needs no introduction. This album, I'm kind of underwhelmed by this album, actually. Although, it's not, like, awful, it's not terrible, but, what do you expect from a mainstream pop album nowadays, on this album we get a few corny, unnecessary instrumental cuts, and a few forgettable, over-dramatic, drab songs, but there are also a few solid and wild pop songs that I really dig on this track list. The track Maria is surprisingly one of the better songs on this track list. It's a pretty solid opener that's low-key powerful. Low-key powerful. I don't know why. And then the second actual song track, Sick of Sittin, is a really fiery and flamey pop song with a very heavy grunge rock influence to it that I kinda like. And then we also have the song Twice, which has a folk flavor to it. What the heck? It looks like it's moving. My books. Okay, ignore that. The song Twice has sort of a folk flavor to it. That's a really sweet, and it's just such a I guess thoughtful and humble ballad, in my opinion. Easily the best track on the entire album. And the album Ender, Unless It's With You, it's also a pretty neat track. It's very sentimental and warm. And let's talk about Masochist, which is a song about, Christina Aguilera trying to love someone, but at the same time loving someone kind of hurts her. And it's like, why am I hurting myself? It's kind of masochist. And it's just a very cheesy topic, in my opinion. The track Pipe is a little dancey, a little sweet, but it's very stripped back with the drum beat, and it just kind of feels awkward. And what's even more awkward is the track Right Moves, which sounds very bland, and the instrumentals are very minimalistic, and it just feels very awkward, with the harmonies that doesn't really do anything. The track Fall in Line, I'm just not impressed with this track. Not really. Again, it sounds really awkward with the sound effects. It sounds like it would be a banger at first, but then it breaks into this tame and weak pop track that's just there for no reason. The track Like I Do is another really underwhelming cut on this album. It features Goldlink, and Goldlink spits some of the dumbest and most moronic bars on this track. Like, what? And then there's the track Deserve, which is a pretty forgettable track about love, and it has a very strong trap beat. I mean, I have nothing against trap beats, but I feel like trap beats are a little bit too overused on this album. I know trap is a trend now, but you don't have to incorporate it in almost every single song. And Accelerate is easily the worst track on the album. It's just a mess. There are multiple beat switches on this track that just feels very tasteless and very random. And all these instrumentals, all these vocals, all these rap verses, all these beats, it's just sliding in and out of one another. It's just such a mess. I have to consider this as one of the worst tracks of the year, to be honest, because it's just a pure mess. So overall, I'm not digging this album too much. I'm giving it a 5 to a 4 out of 10. Same score as that new Migos album, to be honest. And then, of course, save the best for the last. We have the new Bladee album, Red Light. Ha ha. Ha ha. So, I mean, if you enjoy this album, good for you. And if you want to defend Bladee, go ahead. But this is just my opinion, so don't hate me for this, okay? I don't hate me because I dislike this album, because actually, to be honest, I actually dislike this album. So, Bladee is this quote-to-quote rapper from Sweden, and who's in this young, lean trend wave, who's also making auto-tune, trap rap, cloud rap tracks. And like, this genre it's not that great. However, it could have been great, but in general it's not that great. And Bladee is doing this genre even worse on this album. Like, first of all, let's talk about the vocals, because the vocals is what truly killed this album. Bladee sounds super one-dimensional on this album, super lifeless and flavorless. Just like the latest Nav album, Nav sounds completely lifeless and flavorless on his last album, but Bladee sounds even worse. Like, it sounds like, not only does he sound like he's dead, he's literally dead, it sounds like his voice keeps on cracking constantly every second because of all these thick auto-tune slapped on top of his dead, deaf-tone, flavorless voice. Like, it sounds like a wasteland. It sounds like a zombie trying to sing his way through a freaking awful album with some of the cheapest beats. And, I mean, it would be better if this album is an instrumental album with the blissful trap beats and, I don't know. I guess the only selling point for an instrumental album similar to this album is the blissful trap beats, but still, even if it is an instrumental album, the production is still really bad. The beat is still really poorly written. Is it even written? Like, it's so lazily written. I'm kinda shocked at how, like, lazily written the beats are, you know? It's just really awkward, you know? Like the production is really painfully awkward for a bulk of the albums, and it sounds like a bunch of random notes bleeping and blooping without any coordination whatsoever. And there are a lot of tracks where the instrumentation, where the beat becomes very quiet and we only hear blades constantly cracking, dead-ass vocals just blabbering in the front, and it's just super awkward. The mixing is super bad. The sound, it sounds really off in a lot of the tracks on the album, and this album just feels like a barren wasteland, to be honest. Yeah, if I were to pick a best track on this album, it's a really, really, really tough pick, but I have to go with the last track, I'm Goofy, which is pretty self-explanatory. I'm Goofy. The second last track is titled Puppet Master, which feels like it could have been something exciting. It turns out it's just a very slow, very boring, drab, underwhelming, moody piece of auto-tune trash. The track Decay literally sounds like it's decaying. The track Nike Just Do It equally sounds dead and flavorless, and it's so non-motivational. The song is titled Nike Just Do It, and it sounds so unmotivational. It sounds so discouraging. It's like Bladee is kind of complaining that, like, I'm wearing Nike shoes. It says just do it, but I just don't want to do it, man. I just don't want to do it. The track Obedient and For You also has features, but both of them are very insignificant and forgettable. Track Steve Jobs tries to be futuristic, but all it is just a bunch of washed out beats, just like any other track on this album. And the track Golden Boy is just painful. Oh my gosh, it's just So the worst is Golden Boy. The best is I'm Goofy. I'm giving the new Bladee album Red Light a strong 1 out of 10. The only reason why I'm not giving it like a very light 1 or even a 0 is because it's not super terrible. It's hideous. It's mind-blowingly bad, like Kid Cudi's Speedin' Bullet to Heaven or Corey Feldman's Angelic to the Core. But still, it's a barren wasteland. Like, there's nothing in this album that's redeemable. Nothing. But if you enjoy this album, good for you. But I don't. And this is just my opinion. So, have you listened to all these albums from 1 to 10? How much did you rate them? Like if you like them, hate if you hate them, and subscribe if you want more.